April 12, 1944. Mid-morning sunlight cut through the thin haze over a sprawling field outside Champaign, Illinois. The scent of freshly turned soil mingled with the acrid tang of diesel, a harsh contrast to the earthy aroma that some of the prisoners, men like Unteroffizier Karl Hoffman and Gefreiter Klein, had imagined from stories of European farms. The convoy rumbled along the dusty road, trucks loaded with German POWs bouncing over the uneven terrain. The men strapped into their seats with expressions ranging from weary resignation to anxious curiosity. Karl pressed his forehead against the cold metal frame of the truck and squinted at the fields stretching out before him. He had expected something different. He imagined a Europe of toil, of peasants bending under the sun, hands raw and calloused from planting and harvesting. Instead, he saw something entirely foreign. The fields were dotted not with laborers but with long, metallic machines that roared and hissed as they moved through the golden waves of wheat and corn. Tractors with wide steel wheels churned the earth effortlessly. Combines sliced through the stalks with mechanical precision, and a distant line of irrigation systems hissed and sprayed, all automated, all humming with an almost sentient efficiency. Gefreiter Klein whispered under his breath to the man beside him. "Sind Sie verrückt? Where are the people?" His eyes darted between the monsters of steel, trying to reconcile what he knew with what he saw. The other prisoners murmured among themselves, their voices low, a mix of German and broken English picked up from occasional guards. Captain Lawrence McBride, the American officer overseeing the transfer, walked alongside the convoy, tipping his hat as he waved to a farmer directing a tractor. His broad, sunburned face carried the easy confidence of a man who knew the land, who had mastered both soil and machine. As the trucks came to a stop at the edge of the field, the prisoners were herded down. The ground beneath their boots was soft from spring rain, yet the rhythmic vibrations of engines beneath the earth seemed to pulse up through their souls. They were handed straw hats, some more for protection from the sun than for actual utility, and directed toward a nearby barn, where a bulletin board displayed the work assignments. Karl ran his hand over the rough wood, the grain sticking to his sweaty palm, and tried to keep his jaw from dropping. "Today you will assist with planting corn," McBride announced. "Tractors will handle the plowing and seeding. You will guide the machines and make sure nothing jams. Keep up and don't get in the way." The words barely registered as Karl and the others took their first steps toward the tractors. The machines were massive, covered in layers of dust and caked mud, their engines already rumbling in anticipation. A few prisoners froze, staring at the metal behemoths as if the machines might lunge at them. Hoffman, normally a man of rigid discipline and composure, found his hands shaking as he approached one of the tractors. The operator, a young farmer named Billy Turner, leaned casually on the cab. He had a sunburned nose, freckles, and a grin that suggested amusement at the prisoner's astonishment. "Don't worry, boys," he called out. "She's friendly. Just keep her straight and she'll do the work of 20 men. Hoffman blinked, trying to make sense of the idea that a machine could replace an entire squad of laborers. His mind flickered back to fields back in Bavaria, to mornings where neighbors worked side by side, and the absurdity of the comparison made his stomach twist. The first tractor lurched forward. The metal groaned, wheels turning, soil lifting and falling in neat furrows. Hoffman and Klein walked alongside, hands gripping the machine lightly, guiding it over the uneven terrain, and for the first time, they felt the weight of America pressing down on them, not with rifles or bombs, but with machines' efficiency and an alien rhythm of labor. The realization hit. This was a war of a different kind, one fought not only with bullets and bombs, but with horsepower and gears. The world they had known, where humans bent the earth with their backs and sweat, seemed to vanish under the relentless march of mechanization. The morning wore on, and the prisoners began to understand the rhythm of this strange American farm. The tractors moved steadily, almost alive in their precision, guided by human hands but powered by engines that seemed to have their own minds. Unteroffizier Karl Hoffman struggled to keep pace, his boots sinking into the soft, freshly plowed earth. Each revolution of the tractor's wheels sent clods of soil tumbling, a stark contrast to the careful hand-turned spade he remembered from home. Klein tried to mount a combine, a towering contraption with rotating blades that cut through the wheat as though slicing paper. He hesitated, his fingers brushing against the polished levers, feeling the hum of the engine vibrate through his palms. In Germany, we use scythe, hands, labor. He muttered to himself, disbelief creeping into his tone. Nearby, Corporal Heinzberger, usually composed, watched in awe as the machine processed stalk after stalk, separating grain with mechanical grace, dropping it into neat sacks with the efficiency of a factory. The prisoner's confusion was compounded by the farmer's casual competence. Billy Turner, still leaning against his tractor, chuckled when he saw Berger's astonishment. "Relax, boys. The machines do the heavy lifting. You just make sure nothing clogs the gears and that the rows stay straight. It's simple once you get used to it." Berger swallowed hard. Simple. The word felt alien, almost mocking. He had imagined American farms as vast, back-breaking human endeavors, but here was a world where one man could do the work of dozens with the push of a lever. Hoffman's mind wandered to the war back in Europe. He thought of the men he had led into the mud and blood of the Eastern Front, the endless trenches, the roar of artillery, the raw human effort needed to survive. And now here he was, faced with fields that seemed to laugh at that struggle, fields conquered not with rifles or sweat, but with metal and horsepower. The contrast was dizzying, and a sense of dislocation settled over him. This was not the rural Europe he knew. It was something new, industrial, efficient, and unyieldingly American. As the hours passed, some of the prisoners began to grasp the mechanics, guiding tractors with tentative hands, lifting levers, adjusting dials. They discovered that steering required not brute strength but attention, that timing and coordination mattered more than raw effort. Klein, once skeptical, found a strange satisfaction in mastering a simple task, ensuring a row of corn seed dropped evenly into the soil. It was alien, but it worked, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a spark of competence in a world that had seemed utterly incomprehensible that morning. Meanwhile, the air was filled with the constant hum of engines, punctuated by the occasional bark of an American farmer directing a tractor or shouting instructions. Dust rose in clouds around the wheels, coating the prisoners' uniforms, making their hands black with grime. Yet the machines pressed on, relentless, indifferent to human awe or fear. Hoffman watched as a distant field, once a chaotic expanse of stalks and weeds, became a pattern of perfect parallel lines, evidence of the mechanical order imposed on the land. He could not help but feel a twinge of envy mixed with fear. Humans could not match this precision. Even 100 men could not reproduce the efficiency of one American machine. By mid-afternoon, small bonds began to form between the POWs and the machines, awkward and hesitant at first. Berger spoke aloud to the tractor he was guiding, as if the engine could understand him. "Careful now. Steady, steady." The farmer nearby laughed quietly, shaking his head. "Talk to her if you like. She listens better than most of us," he said. The irony was not lost on the prisoners, and some chuckled, the sound rusty in their throats after months of war and confinement. They were learning not just to operate the machines, but to respect them, to understand the rhythm of this foreign land. Yet beneath the surface of curiosity and tentative admiration, a deeper unease lingered. The mechanization was not just a novelty. It was a symbol, a reminder that America's strength did not rely solely on its men, but on its ability to harness technology, to reshape the natural world with ease. The prisoners sensed the implications, even if they could not fully articulate them. This was a nation prepared not only for war, but for productivity on a scale that dwarfed the Europe they knew. And in that realization, the awe they felt was inseparable from a quiet, nagging dread. By late afternoon, the sun hung low over the Illinois horizon, casting long shadows across the mechanized landscape. The prisoners, sweat dripping from their brows, were beginning to settle into an uneasy routine, but it was not without friction. The cultural gap between the German POWs and their American hosts was as wide as the fields themselves. Small misunderstandings sparked tense moments, punctuated by the relentless mechanical hum of tractors and combines. Unteroffizier Karl Hoffman found himself face to face with a seemingly simple task, clearing a jammed conveyor on a combine. He tugged and twisted, muscles straining against the stubborn metal, muttering curses in German. A young American worker, Thomas "Tommy" Jenkins, approached, whistling softly, his hands on his hips. "Here, let me show you," he said in clipped, practical English. He demonstrated, moving parts with ease that came only from years of intimate familiarity with machinery. Hoffman watched, jaw tight, pride warring with necessity. He wanted to do it on his own, to prove his skill. But the machine had its own language, one he did not yet speak. Meanwhile, Klein had been assigned to monitor the planting depth on a large tractor-pulled seeder. He measured carefully, adjusting levers and making calculations in his head. Nearby, Corporal Heinz Berger noticed the tractor operator, a woman named Mary Whitaker, giving orders with a tone that brooked no argument. The prisoners were struck by her confidence. This was a woman commanding machines and men alike, something unthinkable in the rigidly patriarchal society many had left behind in Germany. Berger felt a flicker of embarrassment, of inadequacy, as he struggled to follow the rhythm of the machinery under her watchful gaze. Despite the occasional tension, moments of human connection emerged. During a short break, Billy Turner tossed a peanut at Berger, who caught it awkwardly. Laughter broke through the monotony, bridging some of the cultural divide. The Americans spoke casually of baseball, farming techniques, and the promise of the upcoming harvest, while the Germans shared stories of home, of small villages, and winters spent under snow and mud. It was a strange camaraderie, fragile yet persistent, forged in shared labor and the dust of mechanized fields. But the machinery remained an unyielding presence, a silent teacher of American ingenuity. Klein marveled at the way a single tractor could plow acres in minutes, something that in Germany would have required an entire crew of laborers. The contrast struck him deeply. He realized that while European farms depended on manpower, America had mastered the art of substituting muscle with machines. Every lever, pedal, and wheel was a reminder of a civilization organized around efficiency and speed, a civilization that could mobilize resources on a scale unimaginable to a war-torn continent. By evening, the work slowed and the prisoners were allowed to rest near the barn. The setting sun painted the sky in fiery streaks of orange and purple, reflecting off the metal of tractors lined up like sentinels. Hoffman sat on the edge of a hay bale, fingers tracing the rough fibers, trying to reconcile his day. The machines had impressed him, yes, but also unsettled him. In Germany, labor was visible, tangible, a measure of human endurance. Here, it was replaced by the relentless precision of engines and gears. The realization was unsettling. This mechanization was not merely about convenience, it was a statement of power, a quiet dominance over nature itself. In whispered conversations, the POWs speculated about the implications. Could such efficiency help America in the war effort? Would German tactics, reliant on human endurance and discipline, ever measure up to a nation where a single man with a machine could do the work of dozens? These thoughts lingered as the prisoners lay down on straw-strewn floors, the night punctuated by the occasional distant rumble of engines still at work in other fields. Sleep was uneasy, filled with visions of steel, soil, and the strange alien rhythm of an America powered by machines. Morning arrived with a crisp chill, dew clinging to the tall cornstalks like tiny beads of glass. The prisoners rose before the sun, led to the fields by the low, steady rumble of tractors starting up, engines coughing to life in mechanical cadence. This day would be different. The Americans had decided to test the POWs' initiative. They would allow them to take more control over certain machines, to see how well they could adapt to this strange system of labor. Karl Hoffman was assigned to oversee a seed drill, a contraption that could plant acres of corn in minutes, far beyond the capacity of human hands. The machine shuddered under his touch, pistons pumping, belts spinning, and Hoffman felt a thrill of apprehension. For weeks he had seen these machines from a distance, observed their operators with awe, but now the responsibility rested on him. Every misstep, every misaligned row, would be immediately visible, a testament to his skill or lack thereof. Klein and Heinz Berger worked with a combine harvester, following the precise path of furrows laid the day before. Klein adjusted the height of the cutting blades while Berger monitored the grain collection system, ensuring nothing spilled. "Careful, careful," Berger muttered, gripping the steering wheel tightly. He glanced at Klein, who nodded, both men silently acknowledging the odd intimacy that formed between human and machine. These were not beasts of burden, not tools that responded merely to brute strength. They were extensions of the mind, requiring attentiveness, timing, and judgment. The farmers observed from nearby, offering guidance in clipped, efficient phrases. Mary Whitaker, tractor operator extraordinaire, moved like a conductor among the machinery, her hands gesturing to direct attention where it was needed, her voice cutting through the hum of engines. "Adjust the lever, Karl. Don't let it bog down." Hoffman complied, surprised by how quickly he could respond to the machine's needs. Each successful adjustment brought a mix of relief and pride. He was learning the rhythm, the unspoken dialogue between man and machine. By mid-morning, the prisoners began to see patterns. Machines were not just replacements for human labor. They were teachers demanding careful observation and strategic thought. Karl realized that guiding a tractor was not about brute force. It was about anticipation, about reading the land and the machine in tandem. Klein marveled at the synchronization required. The speed of the tractor, the depth of the plow, the timing of the seed distribution, all had to align perfectly. The work became almost meditative, a dance between human intelligence and mechanical precision. Yet even as understanding grew, so did a quiet tension. Berger noticed the Americans' easy competence, the effortless efficiency with which they moved from tractor to combine to irrigation system. He whispered to Klein, "Do you think they ever tire?" Klein shook his head, feeling the gnawing realization that this was a society where humans and machines existed in partnership in ways that Germans had never imagined. Exhaustion existed, yes, but it was mitigated by the machine's relentless, precise labor. Here, manpower alone was insufficient. Ingenuity, machinery, and coordination ruled. During a brief lunch break, the POWs compared notes discussing the differences between American and European farming techniques. The Germans spoke of hand-tended fields, communal labor, and the rhythm of human toil. The Americans spoke of horsepower, hydraulics, and mechanized efficiency. The contrast was stark. What surprised the POWs most was not merely the presence of machines, but the way Americans treated them as extensions of their will, almost partners in labor rather than mere instruments. It was an alien philosophy, one that challenged everything they had been taught about work, effort, and value. As the afternoon wore on, Hoffman paused to observe a distant field, where a single tractor seemed to plow with tireless determination, leaving neat rows of soil behind. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that this mechanization was more than convenience. It was an expression of American power, resilience, and ingenuity. It was a reminder that victory in any endeavor, war, agriculture, industry, depended not just on human effort, but on the clever use of tools that multiplied that effort beyond imagination. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold, the prisoners were gathered near the edge of a harvested field. Machines were parked in orderly rows, their engines cooling with a soft hiss, while the men, sweaty, grimy, yet oddly exhilarated, leaned against tractors and hay bales. The day's labor was done, but the mental weight of what they had experienced pressed heavily on Karl Hoffman, Dieter Klein, and Heinz Berger. Hoffman gazed across the endless fields, the neat, mechanical precision of the planted rows, a stark reminder of how thoroughly the Americans had harnessed their land. "In Germany, it's all hands, all sweat. We work, we toil," he murmured in German to Klein. "Here, it is different. One man, one machine. He can do the work of many." Klein nodded, his face shadowed by the brim of his straw hat, thoughts tangled in awe and unease. They had arrived expecting labor, expecting human effort, and found instead an army of machines that seemed to render traditional toil almost obsolete. Berger, typically quiet, spoke finally. "It's not just the machines," he said. "It's how they think. Americans, they've built systems. Everything has a place, a purpose. Even the machines know their part. We fight wars with men, but they fight with men and machines together, and somehow it works." There was a heaviness to his words, a recognition that the war they had known, one of human endurance and sacrifice, was only one version of strength. Here was a strength they had not anticipated, not measured by courage alone, but by efficiency, organization, and the relentless multiplication of human labor through technology. The prisoners' reflections extended beyond the battlefield. They noticed how machines shaped daily life, not just in war, but in peace. The American farmers laughed as they swapped stories of mechanical failures and triumphs, treated machines as partners rather than tools. Meals were cooked quickly with stoves and refrigerators. Water ran through pipes rather than being carried in buckets. Communication was instantaneous by telephone. To the POWs, it felt as though they had stepped into a parallel world, one where human energy was amplified, where sweat alone was no longer enough. Karl, walking slowly toward the barn, ran a hand over a tractor's warm metal hood. This changes everything," he whispered. The realization settled uncomfortably. America's advantage was not merely in men or weapons, but in the way they had reshaped work itself. One man could accomplish what dozens might in Germany, and the scale of production was staggering. The war effort, the economy, even daily life was powered by this mechanized logic, a logic that the prisoners could see but could not immediately replicate. By twilight, small groups of prisoners began sharing their own insights with one another. They debated what they had learned, comparing it with farms back home, imagining how German agriculture could adapt or fail. They realized that no matter how skilled, strong, or disciplined, human labor alone could never match the scale, precision, and relentless productivity of machines paired with human ingenuity. It was a lesson that lingered, uncomfortable yet undeniable. That night, as they lay on the straw in the barn, the sound of a distant tractor starting and the hum of irrigation pumps lulled some into restless sleep. The POWs dreamed of steel wheels and whirring engines, of endless fields stretching toward a horizon they had never imagined. They were no longer merely soldiers or prisoners. They were witnesses to a new kind of power, one that relied as much on machinery as on human effort. And they understood that this was a war and a world where the rules they had known did not fully apply. Weeks passed, and the German POWs settled into a rhythm with the machines. They had learned to start and stop tractors with precision, monitor combines without panic, and even anticipate the quirks of hydraulic seeders. Yet the novelty never fully faded. Each morning brought a renewed sense of astonishment. The sheer power of a single machine, the ease with which an American farmer could manipulate acres of soil, the uncanny coordination of metal and human hand. April 28, 1944. The day of departure arrived with the chill of early spring still lingering in the air. The POWs were loaded onto trucks once more, the engines idling, carrying them away from the vast mechanized fields that had reshaped their understanding of labor, efficiency, and American ingenuity. Karl Hoffman cast one last glance over the expanse, rows of corn shimmering in the late morning sun, tractors parked like silent sentinels, the hum of engines echoing faintly in his memory. He felt a strange pang, a mixture of relief at leaving and the acknowledgement that he would carry the lessons of these fields for the rest of his life. Klein, staring out of the truck's dusty window, whispered to Berger, "We thought war was about men and guns. Here it's also about machines, about how a nation uses them." Berger nodded solemnly, understanding that the experience had shifted something fundamental in their minds. The Americans' mastery of machinery had been a revelation, a quiet, pervasive force that amplified human effort beyond recognition. It was not merely farming. It was power, organization, and efficiency made tangible. Even the American guards, observing the POW's contemplative silence, recognized the subtle transformation. The prisoners had arrived wary, curious, and often resistant. They left with an understanding that extended beyond simple obedience. They had witnessed firsthand a system where labor and technology were intertwined, a system where a single man could command acres of productivity with skill and attention alone. The experience had left its mark, quietly reshaping their perception of work, capability, and even the war itself. As the convoy rumbled down the dusty road, Karl Hoffman reflected on the irony. In Europe, they had imagined laborers under the weight of endless toil, struggling under the sun with nothing but hand tools. In America, they had found machines that could replicate, even surpass human effort, leaving the laborers to guide rather than grunt, to think rather than strain. The realization was both humbling and disorienting. These fields, these machines, were symbols of a nation that had harnessed technology to its fullest potential, an insight the prisoners would carry home in memory and story. By the time they reached the camp, the sun had set and shadows stretched long across the Midwest landscape. The POWs disembarked quietly, each man lost in his own thoughts, the day's sights, sounds, and lessons replaying vividly. The tractors, the combines, the irrigation systems, All remained behind, but their impact was indelible. They had arrived expecting human toil, and left with a deep, inescapable understanding of mechanized power. For Karl Hoffman, Dieter Klein, and Heinz Berger, the memory of these fields would linger long after the war, a testament to the strange, unyielding efficiency of a world they had never imagined, and a stark contrast to the Europe they had known. The machines would continue to hum across the Midwest, indifferent to the human observers they had once amazed. But for the POWs, they had become more than metal and engines. They were teachers, mirrors of ingenuity, and witnesses to a power far beyond muscle and sweat. And as the convoy disappeared down the road, the field seemed to stretch endlessly, a mechanical rhythm echoing in memory, a lesson etched in soil and steel.